Non, c'est pour toi, je te le laisse. Great. So we are now on YouTube and recorded. So if you want to share the link, please feel free to make it for the audience, but also the panelists. Angels, please make a, if you want to make it.
Okay.
And we start in 1 minute.
Okay, okay. So whenever you want to open, because I'm trying, but
Yes, I will go.
so
1 minute. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Buenos días a todos. Thank you for joining us today from all over the world to have this new conversation, this dialogue, but this time from Chile with Angels as moderator. I would like to warmly thank everyone for joining us. It will be a conversation today about the digital transformation, which is a crucial issue for our generation, related to many topics for the future of the humanity. It is impacting our jobs, our day-to-day, and therefore we are glad to have this conversation today. As always, the purpose of the Bionic Global Society with those experts today will be to analyze the situation together and, of course, trying to propose new models and new paradigms. Angels, thank you very much for coordinating this event, to have all those people together. We are very curious to hear about all of you. You are a lawyer, Angels. You are leading the IP team at LNP Group, which is an organization board to integrate the practice of law and public policy consultancy with a global and interdisciplinary vision, bringing together a team of highly trained professionals. But what I would like to add also, Angels, it's you are leading many different projects. You were also educated at UC Berkeley, and I'm very glad that today, as a BGS member, you were giving some of your time in order to create together this conversation. So the floor is yours, Angels, and enjoy this time. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ovin. Well, hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for joining us. Today, we're here to talk about digital transformation and to discuss some of the key matters the legal market and any business should be aware of when facing this process. Well, today we have joined a panel of experts that will add to our conversation diverse perspectives and visions about what digital transformation involves. We will address its cornerstone, human talent, analyze how to adjust business culture to technology using startups example and Bionic Company's drivers, as well as revising the relevant legal framework and the importance of data in this journey. So we will start our conversation of today by talking about human talent. Hi, Sebastian.
Hi, Angeles. How are you doing today?
Fine, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, everyone, for the invitation. Thanks, Angeles, for inviting me. Thanks, Ovin, for organizing this instance where we can share all of our experience and learn from each other. My name is Sebastian Bravo. I'm a Chilean attorney. After graduating from law school, I worked a few years in litigation in Chile, and then I went to Berkeley Law to obtain my LLM. I obtained my LLM with a business certificate and graduated in 2017. After that experience, I was very attracted to the Silicon Valley startup environment, and I really wanted to have the opportunity to work there. So I had the luck to find a job at a startup back then at Compliance AI, regulatory change management company that builds software for the RegTech industry. And by then, it was a startup with very few employees. I was lucky enough to be the first employee with a legal education. It's now an established company with thousands of users and clients across the globe. What we do at Compliance AI is basically help financial services businesses manage regulatory change through the use of AI and automation and automation of processes to track not only regulatory change, but also the workflow that this regulatory change generates within the organization. So this helps team collaboration, workflow management, and overall helps scale the effort of individuals within the organization to facilitate the management of changes on the regulatory landscape and also digital technologies. As head of content and product counsel, my responsibilities there are managing the content pipeline, which means deciding what regulatory sources are we going to add to our coverage, but also managing the implementation of machine learning algorithms to scale the work that compliance officers of financial organizations do on a day-to-day basis. So we're able to use machine learning to read and analyze documents, classify them in different topic groups. So for example, we're able to read a document and say, okay, this document is talking about mortgage lending and will be applicable to your organization, in particular to this team within your organization. So this helps companies save a lot of time, a lot of man hours, and overall do not miss anything that's happening out there that might concern them. We also do or leverage the use of AI with obligation detection. So we're able to even read these documents and analyze sentence by sentence these documents and show and highlight these sentences that contain obligations that later in the way will turn into controls within the organization. So as you can see, this is a company that helps businesses tackle digital transformation from a legal perspective, deals with regulatory and legislation from different countries. And we do that, we're building this software using something called agile methodology. And what is agile methodology? It's a project management methodology that was created in the 90s, mostly to help software companies build products that through the previous existing method, the waterfall method, usually software that was being written throughout the scope of a year or two was already outdated and obsolete by the time these companies finished developing the product. So in order to tackle this challenge, agile methodology was born to help companies adjust to change, stay relevant, and also maintain communication with their clients in order to allow these companies to stay relevant, provide deliverables that will serve the client on time and diligently. And over time, this methodology has transitioned not only to software from software companies to other type of companies, but it's also being to be implemented within the legal industry. So when we talk about digital transformation for the legal industry, we need to talk about agile. That's a methodology that allows any type of organization, including legal services, to really stay in touch with the client, generate reports with them, and in a constant and timely basis, understand how the needs of the client change week to week, month to month, and adjust their deliverables to the client's expectations. And more important than the client expectations is what the clients really need, and provide services that are timely, are useful, and relevant to these companies. So when working for a software company that provides some kind of legal services, you see how structured or more traditional organizations sometimes resist change. And we've seen that usually smaller, more dynamic companies on fintech, on legal startups are using the agile methodology more and more, because it allows to adapt to change, generate teams that can work in an interdisciplinary manner to bring to the table what not only lawyers can provide to their clients, but also engineers, environmental engineers, when talking about, for example, legal services for the natural resources and environmental sector, or whatever kind of sector needs fast and speedy delivery of legal services. I think I'm a little bit over time, so
Yes.
pass it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Sebastian. So, okay, so the important to get or to decide in a fast way is related to how we develop this relationship between humans and technology. And I think in this order of ideas, maybe which can help us, as an example, are startups, because startups, as you mentioned, legal startups as well, have developed a closer relationship between technology and humans. So maybe Patricia can explain us a little bit more about this.
Yes, thank you, Angeles. It's kind of counterintuitive, the relationship between technology and humans, because my computer today is not loving me, but we'll make it the best to show this presentation. So
okay,
let me see if I can share my screen. You know, always this gets me like a little bit of nervous. Yeah, it's a little bit slower, but we're getting there. So, well, my name is Patricia Hansen. I'm going to improvise a little bit while my presentation is out. And I'm from Chile as well. My background is in business, and I've been working with startups for quite a while. So I started off my career in an accelerator called Startup Chile. And from there, I worked with a number of different companies in Chile and in different parts of the world. We accepted entrepreneurs from more than 80 countries. It was a startup accelerator, but it was a public policy as well. So there you go. Yes, see my screen? Yes, finally. I bet that a lot of you have gone through this, so
it's working.
A bit of empathy with me. Presenting. Okay. So anyways, I started off my career with Startup Chile, worked with these entrepreneurs. What we did there, it was helping create this ecosystem of startups from Chile for the rest of the world. And we worked with companies for more than 80 countries. We helped them in a number of different ways, starting with education, training, mentoring, but also connecting them to corporates, to larger companies, to actually become a collaboration and eventually work as clients. Angeles, do you see my presentation now, right?
Yes, I do.
Excellent, great. So I I started off there, and then I moved to California to work with Invest Chile, which is the branch of the government that is in charge of investment promotion. So my role there, based on San Francisco, was to look for investors, corporates that are interested in Latin America and position Chile as the place to do so. So in that regard, I had to deal a lot with local governments, local representations, but also with startups and also with corporations in trying to figure out what is it that they're looking for. Surprisingly enough, I found a lot of corporates in certain sectors, for example, in agriculture, that they were interested in looking for M&A deals in Latin America, and that was the way that they were looking to expand. And currently, I'm working with SeedStars, which is a Swiss-based fund and a group of companies, actually. We have a fund, an investment fund, an accelerator, a growth program, and we actually work with different governments throughout the emerging markets. That would be Latin America, Asia, and Africa. And I've also been closely working with the Embassy of the United States as part of the IVLV program. And from that perspective, I was also learning about the culture, the startup culture, through different parts of the US, not only in Silicon Valley and the larger cities, but also some in the middle, like for example, in Detroit, and also smaller towns. So what today I'm going to talk about a little bit to give an overview so that then Angeles can help us out with a few questions is why digital transformation is becoming a priority, especially for corporations, and why startups should be part of this strategy. Three main things about this is about the change that has happening in the value that you're giving out to customers, especially for corporations that they have to deal with in a much larger basis and have to reinvent themselves in a faster space that they have needed to do it beforehand. Also, this creates digital transformation, also creates a change in the competitive landscape, and of course, the economics of market. How the different services, products are traded, now they are facing real threats for corporations that don't adapt. Sounds amazing. Everybody's talking about digital transformation and startups and open innovation and M&A and exits, but there are certain caveats to be aware of. First of all, digital transformation is not something new. It seems it's new, but it's not. It started in the early 90s. And there have been a lot of changes along the way. And it's very important that not only needs to be analyzed from the investment in digital assets, but also in other intangible assets, such as culture, processes, and organization, and also in internal capabilities. Second of all, it's an interesting strategy, but as I said, is only successful when you invest in this like ecosystem of assets, not just in the technology side. 70% of digital innovation, digital transformation processes are failure. And why is that? A number of reasons. But most of all, it is because they have a high risk and it doesn't adapt necessarily to the other risks that are involved in the process, and leadership doesn't take into account that all the time. And the third thing that I want to highlight here is that less than 20% of the digital transformation has to do with tech infrastructure and regulation. And that kind of gives you an idea on why a lot of them are not successful. There's an 80% of the equation that is not necessarily being considered, especially by larger corporations. In terms of the types of digital transformation, and startups could be part of this process, we have 4 types. First of all, you have a business process transformation, business model transformation. We've been seeing companies like Uber, for example, doing this type of things. And we can also see domain transformation. A company that has done it really, really well is, for example, Amazon, that went from the retail business trying to get something out of the core business that they have and then transitioning into Amazon Web Services. And actually nowadays, Amazon Web Services has delivered 60% of the profits of the overall group. So it's very interesting when you see companies that it's not their domain expertise, but actually take the bet into doing digital transformation, sometimes inner and sometimes with startups as well. And finally, another type of digital transformation is from the cultural aspect, the organizational aspect. If we are considering long-term digital transformation, it really requires redefining the organizational mindset, the processes, the talent, and the capabilities of the people that are involved in this strategy. So when corporations really recognize how is the ecosystem of the different types of digital transformation and adapt it to their strategy, some very interesting things happen. So as we can see on the right, this is the knowledge funnel. It's a basic framework for understanding what a design process is about. So first of all, of course, we have at the beginning of the funnel, the mystery, a lot of data, a lot of information, a lot of things going on that we really don't understand. You can replace the word mystery for chaos. Then you have heuristics, which are basically patterns. And then you have certain algorithms. To do this as a corporation, it's really hard to get such a exact process and really having all the insights to do so. Whereas for startups, for example, given that they concentrate on a single thing that they do really well, this is easier for them. Why is important to have startups in this process? It's just the balance in between exploration and exploitation. And it's kind of what I was talking with the knowledge funnel. So startups, they can take the benefit of exploring, but when they're growing, they need to transition into exploitation mode, which corporates are really well to do. So that is the invitation that startups do. Like, let me help you explore what other ways you can find to change your business model, change the culture of the company, or even change all the processes, and then trying to transition into the corporate. Common mistakes that I see. First of all, the executive team lacks of self-awareness. They're not aware of where the core competencies and how they can actually get advantage of them, how they can actually work with startups, how they can adapt. This is something that we see it a lot in countries like Chile, for example, but I've also seen it in the US. The larger the company, the more difficult it is for the executive team to really understand the problems that rely underneath it. A second common mistake that I see, it's that it's, as I said before, it's not about the technology, it's about the organizational adaptability. So how corporations can adapt the way that a startup can adapt, it will define how successful their strategy will be. Then also with the lack of self-awareness comes that leadership doesn't necessarily understand, they doesn't necessarily deliberately pursue, and they don't necessarily guide the process. It's important for them to not delegate it, to make it as important as it is, and also to manage expectations. And to finish it up here, I'm going to show you a definition, a description of a job post that it was here in Chile for a leadership role in innovation. And the thing that strikes me the most in here, and I highlighted it in yellow, it's that a lot of the things that are exposed for this particular innovation role are things that should come from the leadership team. And that's what I mean when leadership lacks self-awareness. So for example, if you see in the back and at the bottom of the job post, promote a pro-innovation culture. That is something that needs to come from CEOs. It needs to come from a strategic point of view. And a lot of the times when corporations don't understand, when CEOs, when the board doesn't understand that this is a combined effort and a startup is not going to come and solve all the problems in a company, that's when the expectations are not managed well. And that's when we have this 70% of processes that are a failure in digital transformation. So that would be it. Thank you, Angeles, and looking forward for the questions you have prepared.
Thank you, Patricia. Well, in this regard, it's interesting to analyze from an organizational perspective how important it is to incorporate these drivers towards digital transformation in a company itself. So in this regard, I think that Julian has something interesting to talk to us about bionic companies.
Thanks so much, Angeles, and thanks to this wonderful panel, Javiera, Sebastián, Patricia, Juan Francisco, Oban, and to BGS for having us today. It's always a pleasure to be here. Let me first introduce myself. Julian, come from the south of Chile, studied business. I apologize, not a lawyer. So everything I'm going to talk about that implies anything to do with legal terms, you're going to see them massacred, so you're not going to see that. My father was a lawyer, so I cannot still tell lawyer jokes, but I know about the profession enough.
Okay.
It's I studied business in Universidad de Chile here. Started working for a consulting company back in the day here in Santiago. Went to do my MBA at Dartmouth in the US. Came back again to work in consulting here. Basically flying around Latin America, Europe, and the US. Went again to do my master's in technology from MIT. And now I'm leading the technology practice for the Boston Consulting Group here in the region. My area within BCG, it's called BCG Platinum, which is the applied technology group of BCG worldwide. Also, I'm a professor at the Universidad Católica. I'm professors at the Masters of Innovation and the MBA. I was a failed entrepreneur more than once. Now I'm in the board of companies and trying to help even a few legal texts that we can discuss later about. What do I want to talk today? It's the result of a lot of research we've done here in BCG, and you're gonna pardon me while I pop this up. Let me know when you can see it. And basically, what are we? Do you see it now, or you see it in presenter view?
No, we see it.
Do you see it well there, or you see it in presenter view?
No, the presentation.
Perfect. So what are we going to be talking today? And I'm going to try to make it very brief so we can have time for questions later. It's something we've developed that's called the Bionic Company. I'm sure quite a few of you remember the $6 million man, or maybe you're all too young and I'm the one that's too old here. But back in the 80s, there used to be an old series about Lee Majors who had an accident. He was a spaceman, had an accident, and he needed to be rebuilt with technology. And he was the $6 million man. Today, you cannot buy a house for $6 million, but back in the 80s, you could rebuild a man through technology with $6 million. And that's that concept strangely still applies when you think of companies, because companies bring the best of technology, bring the best of people, and bring it together to generate an output. And this is where we think the future is going. We think that the future it's going to be bionic. We think that the future it's going to be bringing the best of the technology to enable human creativity. We, like everybody, have listened a lot about people that say AI it's gonna kill humans. We're gonna see the next robot uprising. I mean, we're not in the business of saying what's gonna happen in the world. If we did, we would not be selling consulting. We would be investing in the markets. But we strongly believe that whatever it comes, it's going to be bringing the best of what we've developed as our human race in technology and enhancing the best of we have as human beings. And you say, why now? And why are we seeing this today? And we think that three things are definitely changing today. One, due to, if you think of how technology works, and we can talk about more laws later if you want, technology drives at an exponential pace. So every 2 years, boom, 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 we're doubling the output of a single silicon chip. And this is something that's accelerating. We're thinking about 20 to 30 billion IoT devices to be in the market by 2020. This is a lot. This is more than people. And at the same time, all of this information that's being generated, the amount of money that you need to capture that
has decreased also 50 million times over 50 years. This is insane. The human mind has a hard time understanding the concept of exponentiality, and this is one of the key things. So we have faster, cheaper technology. We're seeing people that are changing the way they work. If you think about the generation of our parents or of our grandparents, a nice long career in a company, or you would start at the beginning of the law profession and you would end as a partner, that thing, it's changing. And I'm not just saying because of the pandemic. This has been happening from before. Remote work is coming on the rise even before COVID. People that are in the gig economy are thinking that they're going to stay there. So again, we're changing the way we're thinking, and people want different things. They don't want one size fits all. They want personalization. They want to build relationships. So here you have like a petri dish of things that are coming together to take you to this very hard time. That and again, I wanted to bring this graph here because it's a study we did, where we mapped the companies that were super adept technologically and the ones that were laggards. We mapped them across time, and we said, okay, what happened at the time of COVID? And not surprisingly, the people that were very high on our list, or what we call digital leaders, definitely bounced back faster. How do you bounce back faster, or how do you become bionic? We think that this has to do with what we call the wheel. And again, you saw. I'm trying to take care of time, so stop me when I'm going through. You saw what we talked about. We saw a lot of trends. We saw that things are happening, but when you start thinking of what has really changed, this is not new. This is one of my favorite examples is when you look at the Industrial Revolution and you look at what happened when we moved from steam engine to electric engine, the results were not immediate. So what happened when you move from steam engine to electric engine is that factories had this huge engine in the middle of the conveyor belts that was steam. And what they did first is that they took out that engine and they put an electric engine in place. That really did not change a lot. I mean, it was cheaper, you could produce at night, much more environmentally friendly, but definitely did not change a lot. It really changed when after a few years, they realized that they could blast their different assembly lines and build different ones with smaller engines. And that's where productivity kicked off. This is not new, and this has happened always. And again, it was ingenuity coupled by technology, what we see here. And we're seeing it again. And basically what we're seeing is that a new Bionic Company will have definitely on the heart a purpose. We strongly think that companies without a purpose will not survive. We think that companies that are not thinking of the impact they have are going to be taken away by the market. But this purpose needs to be given through some outcomes. We're thinking about personalized customer experiences. How do we generate something close to our clients? How do we build new products? How do we enable our operations to become more efficient through the use of new technologies? And again, don't just think of the productive company of the Industrial Revolution. Think of your work today as a lawyer. Think of all of the things that you could do to provide a new personalized customer experience through technology. Think of what new products you could be offering. Think of how much time you think and you lose to every day by doing paperwork. Again, those outcomes that apply to large corporations also apply to you as lawyers. But in terms of the enablement in this wheel that we're seeing, we see two things. One, it's going to be the part of the humans. The other one is going to be the part of the technology. So Sebastian was talking about agility. Agility is key. if you're not agile, and if you keep working the same way that you're working, somebody's going to take you out of the market. Patricia talked about platform organizations, talked about startups and how you bring talent from outside of the company in and you bolt it in. We think that it's going to be super important for organizations to become platforms where people and companies meet. Flexible legal talent, for example. That's going to be key if you think of new ways of working. But all of this cannot happen with the third part of the wheel, which is this technology, data, and digital platform we call. First and foremost, data. Data is going to be key. And again, you guys as lawyers deal with a lot of data. And not all of the data, as Sebastian was mentioning before, it's the best use of your great skills. There's a few things that computers could help you, right? And that's the part where we think that AI could come in and definitely make you more effective. And finally, on the technological engines that we're going to be putting in, these technological engines, which is what we call modular technology, needs to understand that technology is going to change. Technology is not an end by itself; it's just a way to get there. So we think of technology as Lego pieces, or as you see from my build, I like eating a lot. We think about it as the difference between a plate of spaghetti and a plate of ravioli. Spaghetti and ravioli basically have the same ingredients, but then they are rearranged in a different way. But try to take out the spaghetti that you want to take out from a plate. It's almost impossible. You're going to cut the spaghetti. And you think in technology is the same way. You need to build things more like in a way that you can really pick up and replace. And again, Angeles, I think as a good consultant, I have million slides after this, so I can talk for.
I know. but we're on time. Yes. But I think it's interesting to try to analyze the way companies should conduct their business in the way you showed us as a wheel. But also we need to add to this wheel maybe a legal framework, because of course in one of the parts you were mentioning, collecting data, it has an important effect in cybersecurity from the perspective of users, and also it has different consequences if you try to analyze it in a broad legal framework. So I think we should talk a little bit about which are the key elements we should be aware of when we are trying to transform our companies into these bionic companies. So I think Juan Francisco can talk to us a little bit about the legal framework.
Thank you, Angeles. My name is Juan Francisco Reyes. I'm a Chilean lawyer. I did my undergrad course at Universidad de Chile Law School. Then I attended an LLM program at Stanford Law School in Law Science and Technology. And then I did a second LLM on tax law, in Chilean tax law, though, in 2012. I'm more familiar with the references Julian makes. I'm more his age than yours. You're a little younger. I do lecture at the university right now at the economic law department, and the professional area. I have worked with law firms. I started with the idea of being a junior associate, then becoming a senior associate, then becoming a partner, but things didn't work out the way I wanted in terms of the original plans as you could probably conceive them all in the old times. I switched to a new firm. I became a partner at Baker McKenzie in 2013. And then again, with the idea of staying there for long term, I ended up moving to a new firm and starting my own firm in 2017. And since then, I'm much happier. It's pretty much the same kind of line of work. And I have a lot of time to do things that I really like. So it's something that I appreciate. Today, in terms of the legal framework, as you were saying, Angeles, it's digital transformation is something that, as Patricia said, is it's not a new thing. The digital transformation began in the early 90s. There are several acts in the US, like the Digital Millennium Transformation Act, which is an IP act, which became enforced by the late 90s. And the truth is that we have seen how we have moved from an analog world to a digital world, so to speak. And this analog world has its rules, which are traditional. These traditional rules have a traditional legal framework, a traditional reasoning for the way in which things have been regulated. And this traditional paradigms have been challenged, and have been challenged because they have been unfit for whatever purposes have to be conceived in a digital world. And that has resulted in regulatory failures, so to speak, where you see that these failures require changes. And these changes have always been behind the digital transformation that we have seen. We have seen the transformation of I don't know, consumer protection going from a store seller to a digital seller, or to an intermediate who actually doesn't sell anything, just connects two dots on the process. You have seen workers who usually went to offices, to shared spaces, to actually distance working right now, and which has become the norm with the pandemic. And you have seen machines which have taken over the work that lots of people did, and now software which does what some machines did, and now some supercomputers which have been replaced with cloud services, and this all has moved at a pace which is significantly rapid, and which has all forced many companies to adapt or die. And those companies which have adapted or died have well, either adapted or not. And those which have seen exponential growth on their revenue side, sometimes exponential growth on their costs, sometimes exponential growth in their risks. And that's because they are usually not prepared to the changes. And again, since the regulatory framework goes behind these changes, we have seen that the existing rules maybe lack some flexibility, and this lack of flexibility in the legal rules has forced some changes which have not been as efficient as they could have been. I'm mostly working on the IP side, intellectual property side, so I have a bias towards intellectual property and ownership, and how to regulate the results of joint efforts. You usually see that digital companies or startups have proposals on which are cheap to implement, cheap digital solutions, but they do require some basis to work them out, to create them. And they do have to work on the shoulders of someone else, or on a basic program or a basic element which belongs to a third party. And that has forced them to build on top of that, like a vertical, which actually it's a new building block on a higher building, but it's just a building block. And so there are some basic concerns on ownership, which are very determinant to how the company will survive or not, because ultimately what they will create will have value. They will add to the process, to the economics of the processes. But the truth is that if there are no clear rules on ownership initially, or on how this will grow in the long run, they will ultimately not see will not be able to sow what they actually to reap what they sow. So again, legal framework has adapted. Legal framework is always late. Legal rules are always behind changes, and the key word here is flexibility. I think that the basic rules for developing and promoting startups, and promoting innovation, and promoting the growth of businesses which have a light structure is flexibility, and this flexibility is something to which we usually see delayed. We probably what you would like to see in the future in terms of legal rulings is basic rules to reduce transaction costs, so that the individuals or the businesses which actually cooperate in this new world, in this new digital world, do not have to rely mostly on their contracts to regulate their relationships, so that they can have basic rules in terms of my bias, again, to in terms of ownership of intellectual property, in terms of the exploitation of data, basic rules about data, in terms of the interaction or interface with other things, just basic rules on consumer protection, on compliance or whatever. But mostly flexibility on employment matters, flexibility. And that's something which is probably something which, with smaller regulation or lighter regulation, with flexible regulation, should probably do the trick. I think that the most important thing is data. So I guess we now move to our next panelist, which will give us a much better view on the matter.
Thank you, Juan Francisco. Yes, you're right. Data is one of the key aspects we want to talk today about. So, Javiera, what would you say about that?
Thank you, Angeles. Thank you all for the invitation. Thank you to the Berkeley Global Society. I want to share with you a little presentation. There you go. Well, I'm a Chilean attorney from Universidad Católica, and I got my master's of law in the University of Melbourne in Australia. And I work today at Carey Law Firm, and I'm dedicated to technology and data protection matters. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the importance of personal data protection when facing a digital transformation process. Well, it's not a breaking news, the importance of data in these times of digital transformation, but for most companies, the value is not in the data itself, but in its insights, in its results, and in its applications. So in this context, the challenge for companies at the forefront of digital transformation is defining and implementing a responsible data use. Adopting responsible data use as the rule within your companies should not only increase consumer trust, but also help scale digital transformation and therefore increasing consumer value. We are witnesses of how consumers recognize every day more benefits and tend to choose those businesses respecting data privacy, not only because there is a regulation over them, but also because they have incorporated this as part of their products or services value. And at the end of the day, we have a virtuous cycle. But how we get close to this responsible data use? Well, first, my recommendations is start questioning. Start questioning. How do I collect the data? Can I buy it? Can I share it? Can I sell it? Can I own it? And here we have to distinguish, of course, because we have to distinguish between personal and non-personal data, which is an interesting topic. We're not going to be able to dig deeper in this presentation, but regarding personal data, as a spoiler, I have to tell you the answer is no. You cannot own personal data, but you can be authorized to use it. Here's an illustration from the European Union, which reflects that personal data is a human attribute. We're always attached to our personal data. We cannot commercialize it or transfer it in terms we lose it. That is why we as data subjects are only entitled to grant permissions or authorizations for the processing of our personal data. But I really need you to understand in this mission to create a responsible data use, what really is processing of personal data. What are we talking about when we talk about processing of personal data? I'm going to focus in Chilean regulation. However, this picture that you're seeing applies to privacy regulation in almost all jurisdictions having privacy regulations in force, because there are a few countries where there's no privacy at all. First of all, what is personal data? It's any data related to an identified or unidentifiable individual, such as his name, as his address, an ID number. The data subject, this little guy you're seeing here, is the individual identified by such personal data. Such data subject is always an individual or natural person, and therefore any data concerning private entities is not protected by this regulation, and in general, is not protected by any privacy regulations in the world. What is processing? The legal definition is tremendously wide, and it includes any technical operation, whether automatic or not, that allows to collect, store, record, organize, extract, dissociate, communicate, transfer, or use personal data in any other form. So, as you might notice, with a definition so wide on the concept of processing, in case of a doubt, any activity will be always considered processing and will fall under the scope of these regulations. And finally, the last is the person who actually processes the personal data, which is called controller, which might be a private entity, a public entity, or even a natural person, but it is determined for being the one responsible for the decisions regarding the processing of personal data. So this is the big picture. But what is happening in Chile? What is the current privacy regulation in Chile? Our data protection law number 9628 was enacted in 1999, and it's obviously has become inadequate for the challenges presented by technologies and the digital economy in connection to personal data processing. However, it is the current law in force, and these are the rules of the game today in Chile. The general rule under this law, this current law, is that data processing requires an authorization either from the law or from the data subject to process personal data. So this authorization from the data subject must be expressed, must be granted in writing, and must be informed, meaning that you need to clearly communicate the purposes of the processing and the possibility of sharing such data with third parties. The law provides for certain exceptions for the authorization, but unfortunately, the drafting of the exception is very poor, and for that reason, their application is not recommendable in most of the occasions. So we have a lot of critics today to the current legal structure in Chile. First of all, this law provides for only two lawful bases for processing, as I was saying, the legal authorization and the data subject consent. It is not principle-based. It does not regulate any form of international transfer of data, which is happening every day at any moment. It doesn't regulate any type of security obligations, neither data breach notification rules. And to make things worse, there's no data protection authority to enforce this law, and the drafting of the main concepts is very poor, and the development of case law has been insufficient to fill up the voids that were left by the law. And as a consequence of all this, individuals and companies that are compelled to follow this law have a high level of uncertainty on what their obligations are. And on the other hand, individuals protected by this law have a difficult time asserting their rights. And in the absence of a data protection authority, they must bring a civil lawsuit against anyone that is misusing their data, which is obviously a tremendous disincentive.
Yeah.
But the current scenario will change soon, hopefully. And in line with the regulatory trends of the rest of the world, it is likely that our very outdated privacy law will be replaced by one that closely follows the structure and obligation of the General Data Protection Regulation of the European Union, or the well-known GDPR. And this bill of law has been under discussion before the Senate since 2017. And well, for different reasons, its progress has been low, but it has also been consistent, which make us Chilean privacy professionals to believe that a new law should see the light sometime at 2021 or 2022 at the worst. But what's interesting with this bill is that the gap in terms of obligations, fines, and enforceability between Chile's current data protection law and the bill of law is far larger than the one faced by European companies when they had to adjust their practices to GDPR, coming from Directive 95. So, and unfortunately, I don't have the time to deepen, but some of the innovations of the current known text of the bill are that it is principle-based. The main principles are lawfulness, proportionality, quality, security, transparency. It provides for new rights for the data subjects. It changes the requirement of written consent to unequivocal consent. It sets new bases for processing besides law and consent, such as public access sources, legitimate interests, performance of contracts, among others. It regulates certain special categories of data, children's data, historical data, scientific and research purposes data, geolocation data. And it also creates certain categories of sensitive data, health data, biometric data, personal data concerning human biological profile. It regulates automated processing and profiling, and it gives us a data protection authority, which up to this day, it will be the Transparency Council, with powers to interpret the regulation, to oversee compliance, to solve claims, to investigate, and applying fines up to $700,000. And for the first time, and most important here, it imposes cybersecurity duties applicable to all industry, confidentiality obligations, and obligations to adopt security measures, and obligation to report security breaches to authority, and in certain cases also to directly notify the data subjects of such incidents. I know I'm running out of time, so
No,
just
a few more
to let
minutes.
you know this. Okay, cool. Just to let you know, another important change that this bill has is the new sanctions. The current law establishes fines up to $600 as the general rule, and up to approximately $3,300 when the breach is related to processing of financial data. And the bill of law contains fines up to $700,000, and even the suspension of all data processing activities for those companies who, during a period of 24 months, has breached in a gross way the provisions of the bill. And finally here, for those of you who are interested in checking the compliance status of your companies, I wanted to let you know how can we start preparing for the new regulation. Well, my first recommendation is get your house in order. And here are some ideas, carry out privacy risk assessments. Where are the most sensitive areas of my company? Are we making direct marketing? Are we processing sensitive data? What are our security measures and our data breach notification policies, if any? Are we able to identify a lawful basis for the processing we are performing? Are we able to identify data transfer to other controllers? Elaborate data mappings and gap analysis, identify your international data transfers, get get ready to implement infringement prevention models. And also, and this is super important, identify communications to data processor, which are those third parties who process personal data by instruction of a controller, which the classic example is the technology providers, or any third party which by instruction of a controller and in the name of the controller are processing the personal data of our clients, for example, or of our employees. So those are little tasks that I think you might start questioning yourself and start preparing and carrying out within your companies, which for sure will be helpful to prepare for the new regulation, the upcoming regulation.
Yes, it's very important to have this in mind. And I think that phrase is a great phrase, to order the house, to try to analyze first what we are doing as a company and where are our possible red flags, because that prepares you and enables a digital transformation according to the laws, especially regarding data. So, well, I think we have talked about the main issues regarding this topic, but I would like to have a few more minutes with you so we can talk about specific questions. I see that people from the audience are asking also some questions. I'm so sorry, but we won't be able to answer those questions now, but we will talk a little bit more with each of the panelists, so hopefully they will answer your questions in the means of my questions as well. So first of all, I would like to talk to Sebastián. Sebastián was talking to us about legal services and how to manage human talent using agile methodology. So I would like to talk to you, Sebastián, and ask you, what do you think? Do you think is agile methodology applicable to the legal practice? I mean, including lawyers, law firms, legal departments. What are your thoughts about this?
Thanks for the question. I think it's a really interesting problem. See how to evolve the legal industry and the work methodology. And as a lawyer, I'll have to say it depends. It depends on the type of work being done. It depends on the circumstances. Of course, if you're into litigation, a strict agile methodology won't work, or it will need to be adapted. The good thing about any methodology is that it's not a rule book. Nobody's grading you on how you use it. You need to take whatever works for your organization and adapt it. That's even one of the principles of the agile method. There's no Bible that you need to follow. You need to understand how your team is built, how the talent within that team is allocated, and what goals you have in mind. Agile, as it's set up by their creators and evangelists, it's very strict and has a lot of rituals, daily stand-ups, identifying goals in a periodic cadence, reaching out to the client. You have different roles. You have someone that advocates for the clients and the client's needs, someone that advocates for the team, and day to day, these different interests and representatives from the interests that are underlying to the project touch base and set their short-term goals. So I believe that even, as I said, probably litigation is not the best example, but even for those instances, I think some version of Agile can be adapted and incorporated. I don't think Agile should be a goal, the goal of a company or a goal of a law firm to incorporate Agile. That shouldn't be a goal. It should be a means to achieve the real goals behind the company, the institution, or the group of people that's trying to incorporate it. And we can even think of agile as a form of technology, as a form of organizing stuff and people and goals. And yes, I think it's applicable. Probably if you want to use it right out of the book, project-based projects like M&A or due diligence can adopt easier to that methodology, but certainly with a little bit of inventiveness and creativity, organizations can use this methodology to improve their velocity, improve their rapport with clients, and improve overall their output of the work.
Yes, I think as lawyers, we're used to the old ways, and it's sometimes it's difficult to adapt and to incorporate new methods, but maybe what you were saying is helpful, because it should not be a goal but a means to achieve something. So what would you say, or how do you think attorneys that are used to practice law in a traditional way may do to prepare for the imminent process of digital transformation that they might experience?
There's many things that lawyers or any other industry that resists change can do to adapt or prepare for a radical change. We can see that every company can do it. The COVID crisis has been a big catalyzer and force of change on every industry. We're seeing that meetings are not happening live in the same room. We're seeing that means of communication, the way we handle our data has changed. We need to stop using these in-house servers and move things to the cloud. But long term, I think organizing the way lawyers handle their data, their information, will help them leverage everything that's happening around technology, will help them leverage AI, will help them understand their own internal processes and how to improve them. Also, there's a few things regarding the business model that might be that might impact the law practice. The way lawyers are practicing now with billable hours, it's mainly man-hour business, which with the implementation of AI, there's a little bit of a conflict. Why use technology tools to increase my productivity if I could be billing associate hours instead? Why should I use this piece of software that will get the job done in a few minutes instead of billing 100 hours of doc review? Those are some of the incentives that would push law firms and legal businesses to resist change. But on the other side, competition could drive companies to adopt this change. Why would I hire a law firm that's billing me 100 hours instead of going with the one that can deliver their output faster and cheaper?
Yes, I think that's right. Maybe we should analyze the incentives to switch to these methods and systems towards technology. I would like to ask you something, Patricia. I think that as you were talking to us about startups, what do you think in terms of culture is different between law firms and startups? Do you think they can learn something about startups?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm not a lawyer. I've never been in anything related to law stuff. I do have a lot of friends who are lawyers. And it's kind of surprising that that is the industry that I would say most young people complain about when they're starting off their careers, compared to technology companies, where one of the things that they admire the most sometimes is the culture of the industry. So in general, I think there's so many things that they can learn even from each other. So if you think about the law business is a business around information, right? So you sell information, you sell the right advice, and it's very much focused in the process and not the outcome. As Sebastian was saying, like billable hours, like law firms have a problem in their business model, and their business model is very attached to their pricing strategy. And that's the problem that they cannot change in that perspective. And it's very enrooted from older generations. But newer generations are thinking differently. Newer generations, they have different values. Young lawyers want to spend more time with their families, and therefore there are people that are looking forward to actually being able to work less hours and compromising a little bit of their salary, but in order to get other values around their life. They're much more realistic on how they plan, considering previous generations. So in general, in terms of the culture, and I think this is a very good of like make an example out of it, there are 4 things that most likely you'll think about when you're hiring someone: aptitude, attitude, experience, and education. From what I know from my lawyer friends, most big firms or the ones that have higher reputation, they hire an education. They still ask you, like, what was your grade in this particular topic, you know, when they're starting off their careers. Whereas startups, for example, attitude is the most important thing. And then all the other ones, in some way, they matter, but attitude is the most important thing, because you don't have much money, you need to raise investment, you need to create something different that you've never done it before. You have no idea if it's going to work out, but you need to have people that are willing to go the extra mile in order to figure it out. A startup, by definition, is a company in a search of a business model. A law firm, by definition, is selling information that is already out there and trying to adapt it to specific environments. So I think that if we shift from the educational hiring, which, by the way, there are a few companies out there that they've done really well in the technology sector, that they've have hired per education. So, for example, in the early days of Google, they only hire from certain universities, and if you come from a university that didn't have like a big reputation, you didn't get in. It was basically like Stanford, MIT, and a few others, Harvard, and that's it. It's kind of something like that. But most of the startups, they hire on attitude. They don't hire necessarily on experience because they cannot afford it. And again, it's something never done before. So therefore, experience is valuable, but not as valuable in early stage, maybe in the scalability stage. And it's attitude and this attitude. The other thing that it's interesting that startups, in terms of the culture, and as I said, the pricing model enroots the way the service is giving, it's that it could shift from the way of thinking about, well, this is what I sell information, and basically information that it's owned by a monopoly that enforces it. So basically the state or federal agent enforces this monopoly. Therefore, there are very few incentives to actually change that model. Whereas startups, as I said, they're constantly looking for this for this business model. And one thing that makes them so interested in that perspective is that a startup is going to be almost fanatized about the fact that they need to understand their customer needs and adapt as much as possible to those in order to serve that need. Not the service, not the product, but the need, the benefit that people get out of that value proposition. And the business model, if you think about it, and the law firm, if it switches those things, it could really get a lot of different opportunities and maybe different layers of services and having different segments of clients, maybe not using the same brand, but again, because law firms have this reputational problem. Like you hire the best in class people, the best universities, the most expensive ones. You need to justify this hiring process, and that's why you bill so many hours and they're expensive and so on. So there are very few incentives to lower that. But if you think about how you can actually make this information business much more friendly for your customers, you can have different lines of business, different revenue entrants, and it could help law firms diversify their value proposition. I've seen a few websites from law firms that they're very interested in how they try to show information, but for example, that information is not think of from an SEO perspective. So unless you already know the law firm and getting to the website and find it, you're not going to find it in Google. And that's very little things that you can get in terms of the design of the information that you have that can make a huge impact. It could be a better benefit for the customers, and it can actually diversify the business and the revenue entrances, and by that, diversify their pricing strategy.
Yes, I think that there's also, it is very important to understand that clients drive sometimes the internal policies or the way that organizations behave. So considering that nowadays clients are also changing because there's a generation change, probably they will adapt better to this diversification of the business model. If you try to rebrand a law firm in different segments, and on those segments maybe add these components or technology, you may be able to get clients that will adapt to this and that will like that. And then you can get like the perfect combination between the need and what you offer as a service. So what do you think, talking about open innovation processes and M&A transactions, going in deep law for a person that's not a lawyer, but what do you think are the difficulties of in-house digital transformations, and why outside startups can bring a different value to it?
It's very complicated, but if we have to encapsulate it in one concept, sunk cost. So corporations, they don't understand the value of understanding sunk costs, because they're like, okay, we could change this. Yes, but we've been doing it for so long. This is the revenue that we have. Even though it might be declining, it's very difficult for them to get a detachment of what actually could work for the future and how they can adapt. There are very few CEOs that take into account. So for example, I remember a Silicon Valley company, it's like 500 employees. They have a product that it's really rooted into customer loyalty. They have very loyal customers, but there has been so many competition cropping up that they kind of stayed behind in technology. So a new CEO came in, he fixed a lot of the cultural things, like a lot of toxic behavior, and trying to get that out and getting an A team to actually develop the new strategy for the company. And it has taken the last 2 years and actually developed the whole technology from zero. And that is basically assuming a sunk cost on everything that they did in the product beforehand. And they were actually changing some paradigms, like, why do we have to make the technology in Silicon Valley? There are a lot of other places that we can have lower costs of engineering, and we can diversify how like the mindset of how we are designing the product, having engineers from different parts of the world. Even, for example, from places like Chile or faraway regions. So that is one thing. With that being said, the fact that they're not able to understand and how to deal with sunk cost has to do with the fact that there's a fear of experimentation, because there are higher expectations on basically the price of stock, for example, in larger corporations like open corporations. And a startup doesn't have that. So a startup could be a good way for them to actually experiment, figure out a few things, get a dynamic team doing that, and not having all the difficulties into changing the culture in order to embrace these processes. The other thing is learning how startups can actually make decisions, and which is in a fast way. It's very opportunistic, trying to find this business model, trying to find this market and trying to earn it. So being on the front seat of that process is something that corporates really could benefit from, and not necessarily from an ROI perspective, but from a strategy perspective. Understanding how a startup does it, it will make them understand how they could adjust that into their own structure. And finally, what I feel that it could benefit, again, in the same line, is the fact that given that startups are looking for this very specific thing to do it right, in my opinion, they have a better understanding of their objectives and a better understanding on what are the key results that are going to drive those objectives. generally speaking, any decision is the right one as long as it is aligned to the objectives and the outcomes that you want. And that is something that in corporations sometimes is very difficult to actually understand it, because generally speaking, it could be the price of the stock, like optimizing, maximizing that.
Yeah.
But it's really hard for an employee to relate to that and understanding, okay, what is the value that I bring to this in my day-to-day? Most of the time, leaders don't put out the objectives properly, and therefore there's a misalignment within their teams. And I think that working with startups from an M&A perspective, from an open innovation perspective, can open their eyes, and they don't have to change culturally before that. They're just pulled on the way how these startups are pushing these processes inside the corporations. So it's better like either you adapt or you're going to kill each other. But that's the way actually that you're going to do it in a really fast way.
Yeah, I think yes, you're right. Julian, I'm continuing with the outsiders of the legal industry. In your opinion, why do you think the legal industry has taken so long to understand the value of technology for its business model?
Okay, so consulting and the legal industry are not so different. So if you take it to the bare bones of both professions, they're very similar. And if you look at I don't know how familiar you are with the structure of consulting in general. There are a few consulting companies that are super well established, super well respected. The basis of the business model is very different. Sorry, but it's very similar. So you have people that you take from all the ranks, and you take them from fresh undergrad, you take them to grad school, then you make them partners. They deal with a lot of information, and they generate wonderful insights. It's not so different. When you think about what's the characteristics of companies that are on the cusp of disruption, and I recommend you all an article by Professor Clayton Christensen. I don't know if you know him, but a very famous professor, former BCG also. He used to compare both industries and say, okay, these industries are ripe for disruption. And Sebastian was mentioning too. So what happens when somebody can do what you can do with an algorithm, and what somebody can, when you need to do a lead search and you need to generate background material, you can get, I don't know, 10 analysts to do it, or you can send an algorithm to do it. Okay, that kills your business model if you're based upon selling hours of a lot of these analysts. It's the same in consulting, by the way. It's conceptually it's similar, but then you start saying, okay, what's going to happen with the incumbents? The incumbents are not going to let this happen. But if something we've learned from history is that startups, as Patricia was saying, they don't care about history. They're going to do it, and somebody's going to do it. And at one point, you're going to decide that if you want to do something simple legal, why do you need to pay for 10 associates that need to do the groundwork when an algorithm can do it the same way, and you're going to have somebody check? And again, I'm doing the parallel with consulting here, and I'm open to discussion here. And then again, you're going to see that the industry is going to start shifting. And you're going to have people for the most complex deals and for the most complex things that are going to be driven by humans, that they're going to enable technology to do the things faster for them. And that's, again, the bionic concept that I was talking, again, it applies here too. So why do you need to have people on staff? Why don't you use freelancers? Why don't you do flexible legal talent? Why not? Again, the concept of the platform. So again, I think that this is both the consulting and the legal industry are bound to change, and technology is going to change it.
Yes, for sure. Still, there is a consumer's perspective or a personal perspective from clients that they need something that goes I don't know, goes farther than only technology. And I believe that is experience. And that's something that is difficult to emulate. So I think that is like the, yeah. But anyways, what you're saying is right. You can like use experience of consulting and try to explore the way to change this business model, maybe keeping, as you were saying, for complex operations people, and for others just benefiting from what we have. So in this sense, do you think like open innovation and digital transformation can be considered two sides of the same coin?
So definitely, if you want to be successful, you need to think outside of your boundaries. Let's assume that digital transformation it's whatever's driving us, and open innovation it's how you make this happen. And it can, when we think of open innovation, what do we think? It's okay, we use third parties, we use startups, we use universities, we use contests to get solutions to the problems we're solving. So again, most of the time one thinks of open innovation just by startups. Okay, I buy a few startups, but there are other ways of doing it. I can go and I can subcontract research from a university. I can go and I can do a contest online, for example. Netflix used to do this to help build their algorithms. I don't know if you knew this, but there was a Netflix contest a few years ago to see who could come with a better prediction algorithm for their movie recommendations. And that you open it to everybody, and everybody can participate. So for me, the concept of open innovation, it's what we were calling about this platform. In the future, you're going to need to be absolutely plugged into many other sources of talent. For the legal industry, again, flexible legal talent, seeing other subcontracting parts of the research to other companies. All of these things aren't going to happen if they are not happening now. And again, even in the Chilean market, we're seeing companies that are driving these trends. And you know, a Lemon Tech, you know, an Ulster, you know, a few of these ones that are already driving this route. So tying it to your first question, is this going to be a disruption? Maybe it's not going to come from the traditional companies. So the question is, what can we learn? How fast can we learn from it, and how agile we can be in incorporating this into our company?
Yes, sure. Because as you were saying, someone is going to do it. So, yes.
If there's a business, somebody will do it.
Yeah, for sure. So okay, so I want to go back a little bit, because thinking about disruption, also it's important to take into consideration how does the regulatory framework adapts to this as well. So I would like to hear from you, Juan Francisco. What do you think is going to change moving forward in this regard?
Thank you, Angeles. I think that, as I said before, most of the regulatory changes have been adaptative. These adaptations have resulted in fixes to problems which have been identified, which have been spotted on the markets. But moving forward, in the short run, I foresee that things will remain pretty much the same. If you hear to what Javier explained in terms of the changes to the Privacy Act in Chile, this have been very slow processes. It's been in the Congress for 3 years. The same holds true for other areas, such as intellectual property, which has a legal proposal to amend it since 2013. Before the act that Javier was mentioning, there was another one in 2014, another one in 2009, another one in 2007. So you see that all of these bills and proposals to change and to fix what's not working are taking significant time to evolve and to eventually see the light. I don't know if this will change in the short run. My guess is that it will not. But in any event, whatever is being discussed and whatever is going to change in the short run, if they try to be over comprehensive and try to incorporate into any of these pending bills the new subjects which appear within a given moment, they will still continue to be delayed. My ideal thing to happen would be something which was more concerned with cost allocation, with the reduction of transactional costs in terms of the operations that you see in the market. And I would hope to see that our Congress will change their view in the way in which they try to solve these matters to focus more on this aspects of the legal process. Because if they do that, then this will be more adaptive. And I would hope to see that these regulations are more, give more leeway to administrative agencies, so that these agencies are the ones who actually regulate the specifics of what needs to be done on each area where these legal rules may touch.
Yes, because sometimes our legislators are also in a different pace to industry changes, and also in a sometimes in a technique in means of technical information as well. So I think it's important to be aware again. And what would you say to companies that they, or to leaders of companies, what should they have in mind when adjusting to these processes?
I think that they would surely need to know where they want to be in the short run or in the long run. They need to understand what is that they want from their business in general, which is the client they're aiming for, which are the products they want to invest in, how are these products or services a good fit to their existing and potential clients, and how are they going to offer solutions to eventual changes which derive from regulatory changes, especially in areas which are not sufficiently developed or not sufficiently regulated. So, for instance, in the case of collaborative economics or whatever, you think of an Uber, you think of WeWork, or you think of this different business models. Some of them can be adapted from what exists. Some are disruptive in the sense that they go against the pre-established rules and potentially would be illegal to some extent, at least for some time. And they need to take chances, they take risks, they assume risks when they move forward with them, and they need to be aware of how they are going to respond in the event these risks that they're assuming eventually materialize. With that in mind, again, it's all focused on the clients they want to maintain. It's all focused on the businesses they want to keep or obtain, and how they will solve the problems of their clients and offer a reasonable product compared to their competitors in the market. That's what I think they should be aiming for in terms of how they should anticipate to these processes.
Thank you, Juan Francisco. In this order of ideas, Javiera, can you please give us a bit more insight of how Chilean companies have to be prepared in order to comply with the new cybersecurity obligations contained in the bill of law that will modify the current data protection law?
Sure. This is quite important because it would be the first cybersecurity obligation applicable to every industry in Chile. Today, the most developed industry in this land are banks and financial institutions, but there is no general regulation on cybersecurity. So the bill establishes two new obligations for controllers in this matter. First, a duty to implement security measures, taking into consideration the state of the art, the costs of the application, of the implementation, and the nature and the purposes of the processing, because it's not the same the processing that a hospital is performing and the processing of, I don't know, a mini market at your street. So when defining the security measures, you have to take into consideration the likelihood of risks and the seriousness of the effects that a data breach may have. And the bill also provides that the measures must ensure the confidentiality, the integrity, the availability, and the resilience of the data processing systems. And the controller has the burden of demonstrating the existence and operation of such security measures. So you have to take technical measures, but also organizational measures in terms of data governance, in terms of information security policies, data breach notification policies, and so on, to be able to demonstrate to the future authority that when an incident occurs, you are not able to prevent it because you won't be able to prevent it, but you did comply with the legal obligation. And very well connected, the second obligation is the duty to report security breaches to the Data Protection Authority. And the bill says without undue delay, which is kind of uncertain and difficult to comply, but this is the text we have up to this date. And even more, if the data involved in this breach is sensitive or it relates to economic, financial, banking, or commercial obligations, the controller must report the breach to the data subjects, along with informing the measures that will be adopted to manage them and prevent future incidents. So it seems that there's only 2 new obligations on cybersecurity, but are super difficult to comply, I think, if we are thinking on the stage we are today, which is just a general duty of care, which is contained in the current data protection law.
Yes. Do you think that is this bill following an international regulation where like Chilean companies may be looking in order to comply or to design their digital transformation strategies?
Yes. As I was saying in presentation, the bill follows very closely the GDPR. There are some provisions that have been literally copied from the GDPR,
Okay.
and this is quite scary because, as I was telling, the jump of Chilean companies is larger than the one European companies had to take, because our current law is not in any way comparable with the Directive 95, which was replaced by the GDPR. However, we work on a daily basis with companies that no longer ask for a Chilean law compliance check from us as technology or as privacy lawyers, but for a GDPR compliance check. So this is because in one way or another, the GDPR has become a worldwide standard or a best practice standard to apply. And obviously my recommendation for Chilean companies is to start looking there and to start implementing and applying and understanding the regulation that contains the GDPR. The Bill of Law will become law sooner or later. There's no doubt about that. And in that line, it's better and easier to start now when we have time than wait for the dog to bite, than wait for a regulation to start the confirmation processes and change practices, which means an enormous administrative burden and economic burden as well.
So your advice would be to be prepared and to follow these higher standards. in order to assure compliance with the local data protection law. Okay, I think we're running out of time. I don't know if we'll have time for any other question, but in case any of you, the panelists, would like to ask something to one of the other panelists, this is the opportunity. Otherwise, we'll be wrapping up now. No? Okay. So, well, thank you very much, Javiera, Patricia, Julián, Juan Francisco, Sebastián. This has been a great experience. I believe we learned a lot. And, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank
for the
you.
invitation. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Bye.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
And yes, it was a great conversation. Thank you for this time. I really enjoyed. I learned a lot actually tonight. It was very interesting to have those different perspectives, people from the consultancy part, people from the startup, people from the law firm. It was great. Did you enjoy?
Yes, I did. I did. It was great. Thank you.